Theo, what are some personal takeaways, applications, encouragements for you from engaging with the text and the sermon?
I think this I don't know, it hits differently for me, just because it's just a pretty staunch warning that God's people aren't safe from His judgments per se. So that didn't come out super loud in my sermon, but that is something that I was thinking about.
All right, Nathan, how are you encouraged?
I think the biggest reason, or the biggest way, was the whole bit you had on God is a holy God who doesn't abide by with wicked people. So I just thought, even though this is such a dark passage, like His presence leaving, but the reason why in and of itself is a good thing. So I was just encouraged that this is our God, He's holy.
Yeah, just the thought of God's holiness, and He doesn't dwell in the midst of defiled people or defiled place, and just the seriousness of that conviction. We need to maintain that.
Yeah, I came to be encouraged by the goodness of His presence. While obviously He doesn't dwell with the defiled people, it's yeah, but there is a good reason to want to be with God.
I think I was encouraged and even granted confidence, even in your bit of we were all made to know God and want to be with Him, and He is accessible through Jesus.
I was encouraged when you were describing the way God was at the edge of the temple, and then the city, and then the nation, and I think it really transmitted the heart of God, that He's not doing this because He delights in punishing and judging people necessarily, but that he wants to be in relationship with His people. Thought that was encouraging. I'm still kind of processing that.
Yeah, I found it encouraging that this thing that I have, that humans have, about desiring transcendence, comes from somewhere, means something. I was oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
All right. After the sermon, where one opportunity that you have for growth?
I wasn't super sure how to preach this text, particularly in this context. So I think for something like this, I was short on time, and I sort of defaulted to how I would normally preach it. So I think I probably could have stepped it down a little bit more for unbelievers and simplified my language a bit more. But
Nathan?
Yeah, it felt like this passage was one point of 3 in your sermon. So you were working in the context a lot.
Yeah.
So I guess I didn't really feel like this passage was what you were preaching in and of itself.
Yeah. I did realize that, and I was maybe this is cheating. If
we all can do it once.
Yeah.
I still got mine.
If someone did give me this text and told me to preach it to unbelievers, this is probably how I would do it right now. So.
Yeah, I've got to go. I'm going to rewrite my chapter 11 sermon now. So. Just joking.
Wow.
When you started, you posed the question of religious institutions and leaders and how they failed. And I'm always kind of sensitive to that, but I thought you did a good job of highlighting how Israel failed at that, and then moved into the church leaders. And you did a good job at that, but like now bringing that failure home
Yeah.
to me as an unbeliever,
Yeah.
I felt like it fell
Yeah.
off.
I found myself desiring more discussion and definition to transcendence and spirituality,
Yeah.
and how we look for them or engage with them apart from Christianity, just kind of like setting it up that way. Like, you kind of assumed that we all knew what we were on the same page of like what spirituality and transcendence is, since we were all there.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, I found myself not sure specifically what we were talking about in regards to those things.
Yeah.
I wanted you to come back to Sam Harris again,
Yeah.
especially because you used him a lot early, and that the problem you set up was because of the evil, therefore we don't think, right, that God is real or knowable, right? That's one of the reasons for his belief. And then you went through the history of it, so I thought a good section for that could have been is like, after you went through and showed in your context how they were all bad, like, so we could see how Sam Harris might arrive at this kind of conclusion, right? And maybe you're wondering that here, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
But I felt like you needed to come back to, for as much as you set him up early,
Yeah.
at least
That's
his
good.
arguments, something like that, and show how you're answering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you had a lot of good points and great things to say, but honestly, I feel like a little confused as to like the text still. I don't know if that's just me being me or just yeah, I don't know, just felt a little disconnected there from the way you started to the way you went through it.
Okay.
But again, that could just be me, so take it for what it's worth.
So I think it was a good idea to give people like 8 to 11, especially because you talked about those. But it would have been helpful, especially because you were talking about what was in there, to just point us to something. Like, just look at verse, like,
Okay.
so you did that in chapter 11, you talked about that one verse. But especially in like chapter 10, it was just kind of, this case of Nathan's thing, like it just kind of felt like one little kind of like, bloop. It could have been helpful to even just like further reinforce how the passage was moving.
Yeah.
I mean, the opposite path is even worse, of just like getting bogged down in every detail and stumbling over everything.
Yeah.
So at least you moved, but it was almost like too quick, and I was like, if I'm just, especially thinking, if I'm an unbeliever and I've got 4 chapters of crazy in my hand, which I think is good, like,
Yeah.
then help me use this thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a little bit, so I'm engaging with it as I'm hearing you, and I'm looking at this, and I'm not getting bogged down in this, but I'm like, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright. Well, where was an area that you thought you did particularly well, or something you tried that went okay, something you put into play?
There were like a lot. I did try to do like a couple different things, and we'll see how effective they were. Like using like humor at the beginning. I was trying to like. It was intentional to try to be like, can I win you over a little bit, so that you like trust me a little bit more. And then like, I think the obvious thing to do would be like, just sort of do like a 1-to-1 application. So God's not going to be with you because
Right.
But I think like just like moving a little bit to like the church first, and to them is like more accurate to what's going on in Ezekiel.
Yep.
But also like it's like disorienting to
Yep.
them. So
Yep.
hopefully that like connected a little bit better.
I thought you used concessions well in this. You conceded that Sam Harris is probably more right than I'd like to admit. You conceded, wait, what was it? I have something else in there. But just, you conceded a few things, and I thought you handled them well, and maybe could have gone a little further with them,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that, the thought was great. Like, what you conceded, I think, would help with your audience connecting with you, and yeah, I thought it moved you along too.
I thought you built some tension in there, going from Israel to temple to the church, in terms of just, I could just sense that a bit in there. It worked.
I really enjoyed your main idea and how you got there, and like you didn't give it to us right away, but led us there, and this idea that God is, waving goodbye essentially. So even though the context was a lot, I thought I came away with a really good understanding of like 8 through 11, even if I didn't specifically know 10 that well.
I thought you engaged, like, you spoke well in a room for people who might be hostile to you or your ideas. So I didn't think you misrepresented Harris at all. You like called him Dr. Sam Harris, like you said his, like, so you were really respectful and I think put his position forward. And then like when you talked about like the hurts and things that people might feel at a church, and you kind of went a few different ways, or you saw it, so like you just kind of gave like a lot of, kind of what Nathan said, like concession, like conceding, like, okay, like there are some good things out there, is right, and I'm not actually in conflict with these things, so you opened, I think, good doors for what you were actually trying to say.
Yeah, I thought your gospel connection going to John 1:14, the way you used it was good, and it was connected with that kind of ethos you were building up throughout the sermon. Even when you got to the point where you were like, I want you to find safety, this is where you find it, it's in Jesus. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I thought you did good. I think you're right, where you, so for example, you conceded a lot about you might have been hurt by the church, like late in your sermon, but then didn't let that just let all the pressure out of the balloon. It was awkwardly like, okay, but then you kind of came around the corner and like, but this isn't all good news.
Yeah.
So it was not just like, it wasn't cheating and be like, you weren't dismissing the problems that people might have with the church, the legit wrong they did, but then saying, but since God is who he is, then now we've got something to deal with, which I thought was helpful and effective. And this gives none of you any license to do this, but I do think that in the way that you did cheat towards chapter 11, but it not in such a way though that like you left this chapter behind, because it was just like there is this kind of hope over here. So yeah, if you're preaching sequentially through the book on a Sunday, it's different, but then also you're gonna say different things. So in an evangelistic talk, in a way that doesn't just completely release the tension here, but actually kind of goes, because you don't have to go to 11 to say like, but God's gonna, he's leaving, but he's gonna be coming back. You don't have to go to 11 to do that, which is why I don't think it was cheating. It was just effective to say, see, he even says here, and he'll do that. For that reason, it felt like pretty natural to not feel like, oh, you're leaving 10 behind. Yeah, that was good.
Okay, there you go. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Theo.